No one believed it at first, a secret foreign base, hidden just a few miles from Burkina Faso's largest dam, operating under the nose of the government. But when President Ibrahim Traoré personally led the raid, the truth shocked the entire nation and exposed powerful businessmen who had been selling out their own country. The morning in Ouagadougou began like any other, with the hum of traffic and the steady rhythm of the city. But inside the presidential office, the air was heavy with tension. A sealed envelope marked top secret had just been placed on President Ibrahim Traoré's desk. Inside were high-resolution satellite images of the Ziga Dam region, but something was wrong. Along the dam's eastern edge, a fenced compound had appeared, complete with newly paved roads, heavy machinery, and armed guards. Official paperwork described it as a foreign-funded storage facility, meant to support local infrastructure, but the blueprints didn't match the structures. In the photos, there were strange underground entrances, suspiciously large ventilation shafts, and no sign of the agricultural equipment it supposedly stored. Traoré leaned forward, studying the details, his instincts sharpening. He had spent years reading the hidden meanings behind seemingly ordinary reports, and this one screamed of danger. Within hours, he summoned his intelligence chief, who confirmed the president's fears. Intercepted radio transmissions suggested encrypted communications between the compound and an unknown foreign base. More disturbing was the list of names tied to the operation. Several wealthy and influential Burkinabe businessmen, men who had smiled in public beside the president, but were now suspected of secretly financing the site. They had signed million-dollar contracts under the cover of development projects, while funneling resources to an operation that could threaten national security. The idea of a foreign-controlled facility this close to the country's most important water source was unacceptable. Traoré ordered a full covert investigation, instructing his agents to move quietly, gather undeniable proof, and avoid alerting the suspects. What began as a quiet morning in the capital had suddenly become the start of one of the most dangerous and decisive operations of his presidency. Night had fallen over Ouagadougou, but Ibrahim Traoré's mind was far from rest. The president had deployed 2 of his most trusted intelligence teams to the Ziga Dam region, operating under complete secrecy, disguised as fishermen and night laborers. The agents crept along the river banks, using small drones to capture footage of the mysterious compound. What they found confirmed every suspicion: military-grade vehicles hidden beneath camouflage nets, containers offloaded at night, and foreign operatives in unmarked uniforms moving between heavily guarded warehouses. Even more alarming was a newly built underground tunnel heading toward the dam's control station. Back in the capital, analysts decoded snippets of intercepted messages that hinted at sabotage plans, possibly to disrupt the water supply and cripple the country's economy. The names of the businessmen involved grew clearer with each passing day, and it was obvious they weren't just silent partners, they were active facilitators, providing logistics, funding, and political cover for the foreign base. Traoré felt the sting of betrayal. These were men who had stood at national events, shaking hands with him while secretly plotting against the nation. The president knew that any misstep could tip them off, allowing them to erase evidence or flee the country. He ordered the intelligence units to keep monitoring, but to also prepare for a rapid, decisive strike once the full scope of the threat was uncovered. Rumors had already begun to swirl in certain elite circles about strange movements near the dam, and Traoré feared the traitors were growing nervous. The tension in the palace corridors was palpable. Everyone understood that they were on the edge of a confrontation that could either protect the country's future or push it into chaos. For now, the president waited, his eyes fixed on the next crucial move. The night before the operation, the presidential war room was a storm of quiet urgency. Maps of the Ziga Dam region were spread across the table, red pins marking key positions around the hidden base. Ibrahim Traoré stood at the head, outlining the plan to a select team of elite soldiers, intelligence officers, and trusted advisors. The strategy was bold: a simultaneous strike to seize the foreign operatives and arrest the businessmen before they could escape or destroy evidence. To avoid panic, the operation would be disguised as a routine infrastructure inspection, with military units positioned as security escorts. At dawn, unmarked armored vehicles rolled out of Ouagadougou, blending with civilian traffic. The businessmen, lured to the site under the pretense of finalizing a lucrative water management contract, arrived in luxury SUVs, oblivious to the trap closing in. As the convoy neared the dam, Hidden patrol units fanned out, blocking exit routes. Overhead, drones silently hovered, feeding live visuals to the command post. The businessmen's casual smiles began to fade when they noticed soldiers securing the perimeter. One of them, a prominent tycoon known for his public charity work, tried to mask his unease by lighting a cigar, but his hands trembled. Inside the compound, foreign operatives scrambled to arm themselves, unaware that Traoré's special forces were already breaching their outer defenses. The air was tense, every second stretching like an eternity. Then, with a single command, over the radio, proceed, the operation erupted into swift, controlled chaos. Soldiers stormed the warehouses, seizing weapons, sequestering suspects, and securing the dam's control room. For Traoré, this was not just a battle for national security. It was the moment he would expose treachery at the highest levels, and there would be no turning back. The rest began in a blur. But the real confrontation unfolded when Ibrahim Traoré stepped into the main hall of the seized compound. There, seated under armed guard, were the four businessmen whose influence had shaped policies and lined pockets for years. Their designer suits and polished watches looked absurd against the stark concrete walls. One of them, a silver-haired magnate named Doumbia, leaned forward with a sneer. "You've made a dangerous mistake, Captain," he said, his voice low, but dripping with menace. "You think you can run this country without us? The West will crush you." Traoré's gaze didn't waver. "It's not the West I fear," he replied calmly. "It's men who sell their people's future for their own gain." Doumbia laughed bitterly, but his companions avoided Traoré's eyes, their bravado crumbling under the weight of the moment. Intelligence officers laid out confiscated evidence on the table: satellite phones, encrypted laptops, stacks of foreign currency, and signed contracts granting control of the dam's resources to a multinational consortium for pennies on the dollar. The silence in the room was broken only by the distant hum of helicopters as reinforcements secured the area. One businessman tried to claim ignorance, but Traoré held up a folder with his signature splashed across incriminating documents. "You betrayed the people," he said firmly, his voice carrying the cold finality of truth. Outside, the media had already caught wind of the operation, and a crowd was gathering at the dam gates, chanting his name. Traoré knew the arrest would send shockwaves through the nation and provoke retaliation from those still in the shadows. But in that moment, with the traitors in custody and the dam back under national control, he felt the quiet satisfaction of a man who had kept his oath. The fight, however, was far from over. The sun had barely risen when the first ripples of the arrest spread across the region. International news outlets were ablaze with headlines. Foreign governments demanded explanations, and old allies suddenly kept their distance. In Ouagadougou, the streets surged with both celebration and unease. Crowds waved flags, chanting Traoré's name, while whispers of retaliation traveled through every market and cafe. That afternoon, Traoré stood at the dam itself, now heavily guarded, addressing the nation on live broadcast. "This water belongs to our people," he declared, his voice steady against the rush of the river. "No outsider, no traitor will decide our future." Behind the scenes, advisors urged caution. Intelligence reports suggested that remaining members of the corrupt network were fleeing to neighboring countries, taking secrets and stolen funds with them. The West, caught between embarrassment and strategic loss, began freezing aid programs and pulling back advisors stationed in the country. But Traoré didn't flinch. He ordered the immediate nationalization of the dam's operations and announced an independent inquiry to root out any remaining collaborators. That night, under a blanket of stars, he walked the dam's length alone, the distant sound of drums from the celebrating villages echoing across the water. He knew the road ahead would be hard, harder than anyone cheering in the streets could imagine. Enemies would not forgive, and the shadow of foreign influence would try to creep back. Yet he also knew that a line had been drawn, one that could not be erased. The arrest had not just saved the dam, they had ignited a fire in the hearts of his people. And as the current roared beneath him, Ibrahim Traoré vowed silently that no matter the cost, that fire would never be allowed to die. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, comment, and share your thoughts. Subscribe to Faso Chronicles for more powerful stories that keep you hooked till the very end.